Brooklyn Independent Television.
Hey, it's a big
But
vote.
will Brooklyn really go for
Why
it?
don't we just agree to disagree?
Yeah, that's really gonna fly in
Well, that's a
Brooklyn.
good question.
No. Listen.
That's exactly the point I wanted to make.
It's happened again. The world is watching Connecticut after an act of violence so unimaginable that it's galvanized the nation to act. But just what action should be taken, and how do we talk to young people about it? This is Intersect, and today we're talking gun violence. I'm joined by Shaina Harrison, Program Director at New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, and one of the region's leading psychologists, Dr. Karen Binder-Brynes. Thank you for being here today, ladies.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we're sitting here just a few days out after this tragedy in Connecticut, and no matter what side of the debate on gun control you fall down on, we know that a horrible tragedies happened in our nation. And whether you think it's a time to act politically, a time to draw your family closer, or just a time to start re-examining our relationship to guns and violence, something's got to be done.
Absolutely.
So I know that you've made it your life's work to end gun violence, and you've made it your life's work to help people deal with some of these issues that are all bound up in all of this right now. So I'm just gonna throw it up right now, and just for the families, Dr. Brynes, where should we begin with how to speak with our kids?
Right. Well, number one, I think there's two different populations. The families that are in Connecticut are still in terrible shock.
Right.
And I know there's a lot of mental health intervention, and that's great, but the time for real intervention is going to be in a few weeks from now, where the cameras stop and all the attention stops and the reality of what they've experienced begins to sink in. In terms of the rest of the country who weren't directly affected, children are very savvy. They watch a lot of TV. They hear everything their parents say. Right. So they know what's going on pretty much. And I think there are some guidelines that parents should use with children. Number one, to always observe any changes in behavior in the children. Right. Are they sleeping less? Do they seem depressed? Are they regressing, meaning sometimes children who have been toilet trained lose some of the training. Kids that normally sleep well don't. Their appetites change. They seem sad.
Right.
Children let you know. So the first thing to do is to actually ask the children what they're thinking. Find out what they're thinking. And often you can do that not just through talking, but art projects, listening to what they're saying to their siblings and their friends, watching their play.
Yeah.
And then to really, children are very savvy. I don't think people realize that. They know everything.
Yeah.
And they know when you're lying to them. So I think it's important to be honest with them without giving them too much detail. For instance, there are bad people. Most people aren't bad, but sometimes there are bad people, and sometimes bad people do bad things. And to reassure children that as parents, you're doing everything you can to protect them, that the schools do try to protect them, that every now and then there may be something that happens, but for the most part, they're safe. A lot of reassurance. Encourage them to talk about it if they want to.
And just because a kid is in Brooklyn and may have never even left the confines of the 5 boroughs, and they see this in Connecticut, which is close and far away when you're a kid, it's like another world but within reach, doesn't mean that just because we're sitting here in Brooklyn now that those kids don't see themselves mirrored in this.
No, they absolutely do, and they identify with the bad man. And they identify with all the little children who won't be getting their Christmas and other holiday presents. So yes, we do know as experts that the closer you are to the actual trauma, the more the impact is. But it ripples out like a pebble in a pond. So yes, children are very, very aware of what's going on, and they feel sad.
So Shaina, speaking of that ripple effect, we know that New Yorkers Against Gun Violence does tremendous work, and there's so many outposts right now, and it's gone broader than New York. You guys are on the national stage helping to impact legislation, but we talk about that ripple. It started right here in Brooklyn, a few blocks away from where we are now. So what legislatively is happening on that front. We know that if we have big problems, it takes a lot of different fronts to cure them,
Absolutely.
psychologically and in the courts and in our Congress.
Exactly. It is a ripple effect, and what happens is now we are seeing the effects of gun violence in a way we've never seen it before.
Right.
It has definitely reached home for a lot of people who feel like the gun violence issue is so far away from them. And when you talk about what we can do, when it comes to politics, what we can do when it comes to community, there's a lot of different things that we're doing now, and there's a lot of different things that we're going to still need to continue to do. Yeah. Legislative agenda, it's all about background checks. It's all about background checks. It's undeniable the biggest issue in this country when you talk about gun violence. The fact that you can go inside of a gun show today, right now, without having a background check and purchase semi-automatics, machine guns, things that are ridiculous. I work with students in Brooklyn, and between the ages of 13 to 19, and we talk about the fact that you don't need a background check to purchase a gun, and they're confused. They tell me all the time, the person who does my nails needs a background check. The person who does my hair needs a background check. They have to go to school to do these things. Yeah. How is it possible in a civilized country, industrialized country that we live in, that you can go into a gun show and purchase a gun without having a background check? And then we want these guns to be out of the hands of people with mental illnesses. Right. But how do you determine that?
Yeah, well,
that's the question.
Dr. Brynes, right back to you. Okay. With the mental health issue, we know that more and more details emerge about the shooter in this case. Right. And you spoke about those bad people doing bad things, and sometimes it's just unaccounted for. Right. These people are ill.
Yes, we do know that the last couple of massive shootings in this country have been carried out by young men who do seem to have a background of some mental distress and mental illness. And I think we have to look at a much broader issue in our society. As I was saying to you before, no one mentioned, very little mention of mental health in either presidential campaign. We still don't get parity. People that go to see doctors and therapists still don't get reimbursed by insurance companies at the level they should. And there's still such a stigma about mental illness. And what I always say to people is our mental state is controlled by our brain. Our brain is an organ, just like every other organ in the body. So if I told you had a kidney problem, you wouldn't think twice about getting medication and getting help. Yeah. But if I tell you that you have a mental problem, everybody goes, oh, something's wrong, it's bad. They forget that we know more and more now how much biology plays a role in mental illness. And I think we have to start really talking about getting mental illness out there in front of the community and destigmatizing it.
So we know that this has been an epidemic in our community here in Brooklyn, in particular, this issue of gun violence and what happens and how people are impacted. And when you grow up listening to gunshots every night, that it has an effect. So what are some of the mental destabilization that may cause? Because we're watching these kids right now and we're seeing what's happening in Connecticut and the obvious effects of what we should be looking out for. But there's a whole generation of kids who's grown up with this as the normative behavior.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't know about you, but I go to the movies and I sit there and I watch the previews a lot. And it's one violent movie after another. I happen to have daughters, not sons, but everyone I know that has sons, those kids are in front of the video games. Yeah. I think what's happened is we've developed almost a desensitivity to violence. So even after 9/11, I worked with a lot of children after 9/11, and they felt like it reminded them of a video game. That's what they said. You know, and right after 9/11, there were shoot up Osama bin Laden video games that came up. So it wasn't it was an increased emphasis on violence as opposed to a decreased emphasis. So we need to desensitize ourselves again to violence.
To the violence. We've seen like Senator Feinstein out in California and talking about the 10-year ban on assault weapons. And I was reading that in that time that there was not, the Urban League had a study, and they were saying that it really didn't have that much of an effect on gun violence. So is now, and they're talking about reinstating that ban against the assault weapons, and the Urban League saying our big study said that didn't really have an effect on the violence anyway. People still died in the street. So is it time to change our approach? Should we be seeking different laws, not reinstating the same things?
You instate a bill and it doesn't stop gun violence, you say the bill didn't work. Every bill that you instate is not going to stop gun violence, but the point of it is to reduce what's happening. And first and foremost, we have to reduce the accessibility of guns. Number one, before anything else, because that's the problem. It's too easy to even purchase. It's too easy to purchase. It's too easy to purchase guns. You can buy large amounts of ammunition over the internet. If you look at the you know, exactly what happened during the shooting in the movie theaters, the person who purchased the ammunition purchased it online. There was no way for him to actually go into a gun store and collect that much ammunition from the gun store. When things like that happen, you know, you kind of pay attention to what's happening. If someone's purchasing large amounts of ammunition, what are you purchasing this ammunition for? You know, there's a way that you can kind of document what's happening. There's no documentation of that. So I think before we get into all the politics on what will work or what shouldn't work, we have to figure out why are these guns coming into our community, number one. Why are people picking up these guns, number two? Because that's the most important factor in any of this. And then the fact that, you know, a lot of people think, you know, New York is against gun violence, you're trying to take the guns away. But as people who...
Aren't you trying to take the guns away?
Absolutely not.
What are you trying to do?
Absolutely
What's the
not.
mission?
And I think that this is really important for people and if you don't listen to anything I say today, listen to the fact that New York is against gun violence and a lot of other gun violence prevention programs are not trying to take guns away. We're trying to reduce gun violence. We feel like it's your right to own a weapon. Yes, but that right is not absolute. And it should be regulated, just like any other right. You have the freedom of speech, right? But you can't just go into movie theaters and start screaming fire. There's things that you can't do. They're regulated rights in order, because just like you have a right to own a weapon, I have a right to be safe. And that's what's really, really important for people to understand. So no, we are not trying to take the guns away. We do say that if you are upstanding citizen, you have that right to own a weapon. You should want background checks. Why would you want criminals to own weapons? If you can pass a background check, that's great. But if this person couldn't, why would you want them to have a gun?
Well, you know, the argument then goes back to, like in this case, this was a legally owned gun, which was a ridiculous piece of machinery when you see this thing anyway. It's like every person who wants to be Rambo on the weekend with this gun locked somewhere under their bed. But just like most people, I can't say most, I don't have the numbers on this, but like a number of people who die by guns, it's their own gun used against them. This woman was an enthusiast who died at her own gun. And this is something that's really important when I work with my after students, and we talk about, does a gun really protect you? Because that's a huge issue in this country. We have a huge issue on fear. We're so afraid. We have, and you speak to, you know, the gun enthusiasts, they'll say, well, you're taking my guns away so the criminals can have guns. If they have a gun, I have to be able to protect myself. But the fact of the matter is, you're 22 times more likely to kill someone you love than an intruder when you have a gun in your home. People always say guns don't kill people, people kill people. You have to personify the gun. The gun has an ability to change the way you think, has the ability to change the way you act, and has the ability to change the way you are in a conflict. If you think about fights, when you ever see a fight, most fights there's a crowd around, because that crowd gives those people that energy to fight. That's what a gun does. It changes who you are. So once you have a gun in your home, 9 times out of 10, the thought process that you have, if you didn't, changes. If you have an intruder in your home, someone comes to in your home and tries to rob you, there's an intruder in your home. When you don't have a gun, you might call the police. That's probably the first thing you do. Call the police, figure out where your children are, make sure everyone's safe. When you have a gun in your home, 9 times out of 10, you get your gun. You become Superman. So that's the important part about this. You know, people always say, I need to have a gun, but does a gun really protect you? Does it? Look at what's happening in our country.
And I want to add to that with mental health. You know, one of the things that all these profilers are beginning to speak about now, again, with some of these mass killers, is that They were people who had been bullied. They
That
had
they're
low
not
self-esteem.
killers.
Absolutely.
They weren't
Absolutely.
killers
They're
before.
people who, for whatever
But you
reason.
give a gun to someone
Absolutely.
who's
that
had a
state.
low self-esteem, who may have some judgment issues because of mental health issues, and it empowers them.
Absolutely.
And they, as someone I was watching this morning was saying, they put on those vests and they walk in, and all of a sudden they're not the little nerd or the little techie.
They're a
They're the
soldier.
Rambo.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And those guns do empower people, but in a wrong way. And it's often with people who have judgment issues. One of the best signs of mental health is a good self-esteem and good judgment. And when you have a low self-esteem and you have bad judgment, you put those together. And when that collides with intelligence, which this kid had great intelligence, it's nuclear. It's nuclear in its violence.
Yeah. And is this our moment?
Yes.
What moving forward? I was watching President Obama Sunday evening with the rest of America and said, don't stop short.
Absolutely.
Right.
What's next?
Absolutely.
Well, I was thinking about the Constitution. We,
Yeah.
the people. I really think, we elect these political leaders. We elect them, but we elect them to do what we want.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, as people, I think we really have to band together and say, this is it, no more.
Absolutely.
I'm glad that you said that. And before you jump in, I wanted to express to you guys that we did invite the NRA to be here, but the NRA is on milk boxes. You know that you've not seen their Facebook page, which has been taken down. They've been silenced on Twitter at their own hands. No one has done this. They say they haven't been hacked. They've just removed themselves from the conversation because whether it's political or not, or they think this is the time to discuss their agenda or moving forward with gun control or defending the Second Amendment, they're not taking part in the conversation. So if you happen to be of that mindset that you believe in the Second Amendment, like you said, this isn't something about you taking away guns. We want to take away gun violence. But there's room for discussion here, and informed people can have discussion.
Absolutely.
And whether you're informed or not, if you just have a feeling, we can still talk. But we need to talk and come forward with some kind of policy to get through to the next chapter where 20 young people don't have to be in fear of their lives.
Absolutely. We have, I don't want to go to a totally different place, but I have a lot of times, the gun enthusiasts call our program, our organization, and just basically say, I can't believe you guys are trying to take away our guns. I can't believe you guys are trying to take away our guns. Yeah. And I talk to them all the time about, the mental health issue. We have a bill now that we're trying to pass. It's the 5-year renewable plan. And the fact that you have a lifetime,
just anytime you
right,
walk in, no matter
to
what
own
situation
a weapon,
changes
no matter
in
what
your life.
situation changes in your life. Absolutely. So what happens is that you can be a perfectly sane individual at 19 years old.
Right.
The things that happen in your life between then and 27, who knows? And there's no one there trying to figure that out for you.
A passport expires, a driver's license expires,
See, and this is
my
not
dog
rocket,
license
but that's
expires.
the problem. This is not rocket science. This is not things that we don't know. We know this. We put these things in place already when it comes to driver's license. When it comes to any type of license, you have to renew it. Why should you have a lifetime license to own a weapon? That makes no sense. So when you talk about, I want to say thank you to Barack Obama for actually, the President Barack Obama, for actually saying something this time about gun violence, and it needs to be on our agenda. We cannot send a blind eye to it, because all of the time, we always hear, about the 2 o'clock in the morning shooting. Right. Someone was shot, and it was sad, but why were they out at 2 o'clock in the morning? These kids were in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
They were doing what they were supposed to do, and they were gunned down. Something needs to be done. And you can't sugarcoat it anymore. Yeah. This is in your face. Our country, babies are dying. Yeah. What are we going to do?
And, it's eloquent as it is. I don't ever want to hear Michelle and I are going to hug our kids a little bit closer tonight again.
Me either. Me either.
And I'd like to go back to the mental health issue again. This mother of this particular boy tried to get him help. Yeah. She was thwarted a lot, and I hear this a lot.
As an educator,
yes.
So she was aware
I did a
of
television
the
program recently about parents who call the police on their children, and why was that happening so much, and is that the right thing? And the fact in the cases that I was dealing with, they did try to get mental health services, but again, there's such a lack in this country. You call up, you say, I have a violent child, what do? They come in, they get an appointment, they're given a referral to somebody, nobody follows up. There isn't reimbursement for it. It has to be a marriage of controlling gun use and also making this country much more aware of mental illness and helping people get the help that they need. You know, I was thinking, what if a mother knew a kid had a gun and calls up? What happens? You know, how does a mother or father get help for their kid? You know, it's hard,
like
and there's
it's
a stigma.
It's a full-time job. Like it is, regardless of what you do to work outside of the home and the full-time commitment you make by being a parent. If you have a child who has mental health issues, whether it's known to you, everyone in the neighborhood knows that he's a little off or whatever the euphemism is, they're aware, but that kid needs an advocate. And as they get older, it gets more difficult.
It's true.
They're adults now, and they can't be taken into any place without, once you hit 18, this kid is in his 20s, and his mom presumably is doing the best that she can, but we do need a support system and a safety net and all of those things that bolster a family's ability to pay for it and access it and do it without a stigma.
And not be as ashamed of it, because the shame of, you know, the stigma and the shame with mental issues is so powerful. I mean, I'm dealing with veterans now. There's shame, and the suicide rate is immense, and most of the time it's with their guns.
With their guns. I mean, and that's another issue. A lot of people think that gun violence or violence with a gun is an urban issue. It's a minority issue. It's a black issue. It's a Spanish issue. But they don't realize that more people die from suicide than homicide in this country. That's huge. It's huge. And if that doesn't say we have a mental health problem, I don't know what does.
So next steps. I know we touched on this a moment ago and got dragged down another rabbit hole. But what are next steps moving forward from this? How do we make sure that those 26 people's lives weren't in vain and the people who were killed last night in Brooklyn's lives aren't in vain?
Absolutely. We're working with the mayor's office and Mayors Against Illegal Guns and a lot of other national offices, and they have a campaign now called Demand a Plan. And Demand a Plan basically it is just not just the community's response, but the community's response, the clergy's response, everyone's response, saying that we need to demand a plan to reduce gun violence, whether or not it's these 5 different bills that we think can, get the guns off of the streets. I mean, I don't know if you guys are aware of the press conference that Mayor Bloomberg had yesterday, 34 victims, yes, and what we're saying now is that we are asking for our Congress to put this on the agenda. We are telling our Congress to put this on the agenda. Whether it's closing the gun show loophole, requiring background checks, requiring 5-year renewable permits, requiring micro-stamping on guns so that we can be able to track where the bullets, and ammunition, so we can track where the guns first came from, or requiring gun dealers to have a responsibility act, that you're responsible for what's happening in your gun shop. You are responsible to paying attention to straw purchases. People are buying huge amounts of guns and leaving and selling them. You're responsible for this. So what we're doing, we're demanding a plan now for our country. What are we going to do to move forward? And we don't want to hug. We don't want to pray. We don't want to keep our children close, because at the end of the day, they can't stay close to us forever. They have to go out into our communities, and we have a right to be safe.
The right place at the right time.
Place at the right time.
Those kids were there. Dr. Brynes, you a moment ago said, we the people. That's the cornerstone. That's where it begins. And like you said, it's time to demand something, that action be taken. But on that mental health component and moving forward with dealing with our kids so they don't feel powerless and scared, going to where they ought to be. I know you've done pioneering work with evolutionary psychology as well as developing and incorporating a spirituality
Right.
into that work as well, because
Right.
this is going to be a 360
Yes.
sort of problem and solution.
And I'm also, right now I'm also very focused on anti-bullying. So, it's all, and as I'm in a group of psychologists, we meet every month, and we're talking about why all of a sudden now is anti-bullying becoming so much in the forefront. Well, I think we, the people, are trying to say, wait a minute, enough is enough. Stop letting people be victimized. What goes into making a bully? What goes into making a victim? I think it's all along the same lines that we have to say, we have to support our children. We have to say bullying is wrong, violence is wrong, aggression is wrong within a certain amount. We are human beings. We are in the animal world. There is always going to be aggression. We need that for survival. However, we don't need that for this level of violence that we have in our society. And I think as psychologists and as mental health professionals, along with gun violence control, we have to work together and not just keep everything so separate, to empower people to feel better about themselves and make good choices.
So we've literally got a minute left. How do people get involved with New Yorkers Against Gun Violence?
You can definitely get involved with us just by going onto our website. It's www.newyorkersagainstgunviolence.org, and you can sign up. We have a lot of different petitions going on. You can sign up to be a member of our organization. And if you already have a community-based organization, if you have 5 people, if you have 2 people, and you want to know about gun violence, you want to know gun violence prevention, you want to know about legislative work, what could you do to get involved and being able to speak to your elected official? You want to know who represents you. We can help you with that. Just give us a call at 212-679-2345. Email us, go on our website, and we'll definitely connect.
Dr. Brynes, we know that you are in private practice in the metro region. And if there are any resources or something that people should be exploring, how would you?
I think that people should be calling their local Congress people and their senators, and they should be saying that we want parity for mental health. I think they can call the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, both located in Washington, D.C., and see what kind of panels there are. And I think mostly we have to start thinking that the mental health is the same thing as our physical health, and it needs attention, it needs to be destigmatized.
Well, that's going to be the last word. I'd like to thank our guest, Shaina Harrison, a program director at New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, and Dr. Karen Binder-Brynes. Thanks for watching Intersect.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Watch this and other Brooklyn Independent Television episodes online at bricartsmedia.org/BIT.